Human led an alien girl to safety through the ash fields. Her final nod told him everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Michael Turner had seen his fair share of dangerous situations. The harsh world he'd been born into had taught him how to survive. But this was something different. The endless horizon of ash and fire stretched before him like a nightmare, the air heavy with heat and the faint smell of burning wood. Michael adjusted the strap of his gear, feeling the weight of the protective suit he wore, and checked the terrain ahead. His mission had seemed simple enough at first: lead the alien girl, Talia, to safety. The young alien was a survivor of a brutal attack on her home, forced to flee through the desolate wasteland of ash and rubble. The danger was real, but what made the mission even more complicated was the girl herself. Michael had never interacted with an alien quite like Talia. She wasn't just another victim of circumstance. She had a fire inside her that matched his own. With her bright green skin and eyes that glowed with intelligence, she wasn't what he expected. He'd seen many aliens in his line of work, but none had the quiet strength she carried with her. Despite being in a weakened state, Talia never asked for pity. She only wanted to survive. The journey had been long and tiring, and though Michael could feel the weight of exhaustion in his limbs, he knew there was no stopping. He was her only chance. But as they trudged on through the desolate landscape, Michael could sense Talia's growing unease. Her eyes darted nervously from side to side, scanning for threats, as if waiting for something worse to appear from the shadows. Michael didn't blame her. The ash fields were notorious for harboring dangers that could strike at any moment. Yet, the longer they walked, the more he felt a connection to her. It wasn't just the survival instinct that had drawn him to protect her. It was something deeper, a feeling that was hard to place. Maybe it was the way she looked at him, with a mixture of gratitude and wariness, or perhaps it was the shared understanding between them. No words needed to be spoken to know that they both understood the importance of getting through this together. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the edge of the ash fields, where the air was clearer and the dangers seemed to lessen. Michael could see the shelter they had been aiming for in the distance. It was a small, abandoned research station, one that would provide the temporary safety they so desperately needed. They reached the entrance, and as Michael turned to look at Talia, he saw something in her eyes, something that made his heart skip a beat. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't uncertainty. It was gratitude. Her lips parted as if to say something, but before she could speak, she simply nodded. It was a small, almost imperceptible gesture, but it told him everything. In that one moment, Michael knew he had done more than just survive. He had helped a soul find hope again. Talia's nod was her way of telling him that he had not only protected her body, but also her spirit. That one nod was all he needed to know that everything had been worth it. As Michael helped Talia into the shelter, a sense of relief washed over him. The harsh winds outside had started to die down, and the oppressive heat of the ash fields was replaced by the cool, artificial air of the research station. The interior was dimly lit, with only the hum of the emergency power system keeping the place alive. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. Michael quickly closed the door behind them, sealing out the ash and the dangers lurking outside. His mind raced with questions. He had kept his focus on getting Talia to safety, but now that they were inside, he couldn't ignore the tension between them any longer. Talia moved to the corner, her eyes scanning the room with the wariness of someone who had lived through too much. She was clearly exhausted, her pale green skin showing signs of dehydration. Yet, there was a calmness in her movements, an elegance even in this worn-down state. Michael felt a strange connection to her, a pull he couldn't quite explain. She was an alien, yet her vulnerability felt so familiar, like the kind of fragile humanity he had seen in his own people during the hardest of times. He had seen too many lives shattered by war and survival. Maybe it was that shared understanding that had brought them together in this moment. He set down his pack and turned to face her, offering a small smile. "You need water, Talia. I'll go check the emergency supplies." She met his gaze, her bright eyes softening for a moment. For a second, Michael wondered if she was going to speak, but she only nodded, her lips parting as if to say something, but then closing again. She wasn't ready yet, and Michael understood that. The silence between them was filled with an unspoken acknowledgement of everything they had been through. Michael retrieved a couple of ration packs from the supply room and returned to Talia, offering her one. It's not much, but it should help for now. She took the pack without a word, her fingers brushing his briefly. Michael noticed that she still hadn't said a single word. It was like she was processing everything in her own way, choosing to speak through actions rather than words. As she began to eat, Michael leaned against the wall, exhausted from the journey. His body ached, but his mind was buzzing with the events of the day. He had done his job, but something about the way Talia had looked at him earlier, her eyes filled with gratitude and uncertainty, kept replaying in his mind. He wasn't sure if it was the fatigue from the journey or something deeper, but he found himself wishing he could do more for her. He wanted to help her heal, to offer her something more than just protection. But he knew the road ahead would be long, and he couldn't afford to let his emotions cloud his judgment. As the evening settled into a quiet stillness, Michael looked over at Talia, who was now resting, her eyes closed in an attempt to sleep. She had been through so much, yet she still managed to hold herself with dignity. He admired that about her. It was the strength of someone who had survived against all odds. And in that moment, he realized that this wasn't just about getting her to safety. It was about something far greater. This was about showing her that not all humans were like the ones who had destroyed her home. Not all humans were the enemy. He stood there for a moment, silently watching her, feeling a bond form that he couldn't explain. It was as if they had both found something in each other that they had been missing. He finally turned away and moved to the makeshift cot in the corner. He needed to rest, but his thoughts kept wandering back to Talia, to the long road ahead, and to what they would both have to face to survive. As the days passed in the shelter, Michael and Talia settled into a routine. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going. Every morning, Michael would check the supplies, ration what little they had left, and ensure the shelter's power systems were still functioning. Talia, on the other hand, focused on maintaining her strength. She would meditate in silence, her eyes closed, a calm expression on her face, as though she was trying to center herself, to find some sort of peace amidst the chaos of her past. Michael couldn't help but admire her resilience. She never complained, never asked for help more than she needed. She was a fighter. And yet, every time their eyes met, there was something there, a sadness, a loss, something Michael couldn't quite place. Maybe it was because she had seen the worst of what the universe had to offer. Or maybe it was because she was a stranger in a world she didn't belong to. Either way, Michael could sense that she carried a heavy burden. He tried not to pry into her past, but some nights, as they sat in the dim glow of the emergency lights, he would catch her staring into the distance, her eyes lost in thought, as if she was reliving something painful. He respected her space, knowing that whatever it was, she would share it when she was ready. One evening, as they were finishing their meager dinner of emergency rations, Talia spoke for the first time in days. "Why are you helping me?" Her voice was soft, almost as if she was testing the words before letting them escape. Michael paused, surprised by the question, but not entirely. He had been wondering that himself. Why was he doing this? Helping an alien? A survivor from a species he knew almost nothing about? But as he looked at her, something clicked. "Because you deserve it," he said simply. "Everyone deserves a chance. A real chance." Talia's eyes widened, as though she hadn't expected such a simple answer. "But I'm not human. I'm not like you." Michael smiled softly. "I know, but we all share one thing in common. We want to survive. We want to live. And sometimes, helping each other is the only way we get through it." She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze intense. Then, with a slow, thoughtful nod, she finally spoke again. "You're not like the others," she said. Michael felt a lump form in his throat, but he pushed it aside. "I don't want to be," he replied. Silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a quiet understanding, an unspoken connection. They didn't need to say much more. They had both been through too much, seen too much, to expect anything else. As the night grew colder, Michael sat by the small window of the shelter, watching the stars. He wondered what had happened to Talia's world, what had driven her to flee, to end up here. But he didn't ask. She would tell him when she was ready. For now, all he could do was offer her what little safety this place could provide, and hope it was enough. As he turned to look at her, Talia's eyes met his, and for the briefest of moments, there was a flicker of something. Trust, maybe. Or perhaps, just for a moment, a glimmer of hope. Michael smiled, and she returned the gesture, a small but genuine smile that said everything he needed to hear. They weren't alone anymore. They had each other. Days turned into weeks, and Michael and Talia grew accustomed to the solitude of the research station. They spent their days in quiet routine, with Michael keeping busy with repairs and maintenance around the shelter. Talia, ever the enigma, kept to herself for the most part, but there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when their paths crossed in a way that reminded Michael they were not so different after all. Despite their differences, despite the alien nature of Talia, there was a shared understanding. Between them, they both craved safety, they both craved peace. One morning, as Michael gathered supplies from the storage unit, he noticed Talia sitting by the small window in the corner of the room. Her eyes were focused on something outside, something he couldn't see. There was a look on her face, a kind of longing mixed with quiet despair. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he moved silently across the room, not wanting to disturb her. But Talia sensed his presence. Without turning to face him, she spoke, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "Do you ever wonder if it's all worth it?" Michael froze, the question catching him off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked, carefully placing the supplies down on the table. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her bright green skin glowing faintly in the light from the window. Her eyes were distant, as if she were looking far beyond the walls of the shelter. "This life," she said finally. "Running, hiding, always looking over your shoulder, never knowing if today will be the day everything ends. Do you ever wonder if it's worth it?" Michael sighed, the weight of her words sinking in. He walked over to the window beside her, standing in silence for a long moment as he looked out at the barren landscape. The ash fields stretched endlessly before them, a reminder of the desolation that had driven them here. "I don't know if it's worth it," he said quietly, "but I know we have to try. We have to keep moving forward, or else everything we've lost will mean nothing." Talia turned her head to look at him, her eyes searching his face as if trying to read the truth in his words. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Maybe you're right," she said softly. "Maybe we just have to keep going." Michael didn't respond, but he understood. They both had their reasons for surviving, their own demons to battle. And no matter how hard it was, they would fight through it together. The rest of the day passed quietly. They went through their routines, Michael working on the shelter, Talia studying the data logs from the research station. There was a peacefulness in the air, a rare calm that Michael cherished. As night fell, they sat together in the small living area, sharing the last of their rations. The silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was a companionable quiet, the kind that only comes when two people understand each other, even without words. Talia looked over at Michael, a small but genuine smile forming on her face. "Thank you," she said, her voice sincere. "For everything." Michael smiled back, a warmth spreading through him at her words. "You don't have to thank me," he replied. "We're in this together." As they sat there, the stars outside twinkling against the dark sky, Michael couldn't help but feel that, despite everything, they were slowly finding something that had been missing for so long: hope. And with that hope, maybe, just maybe, they could face whatever came next. The days continued to blur together, and Michael found himself slipping into a strange routine. The shelter, though temporary, had become a sanctuary of sorts. The tension that had once hung thick between him and Talia had slowly dissipated, replaced by a quiet understanding and a shared goal of survival. Despite the stillness of their days, there was something in the air that told Michael they were getting closer to something important. They had been in the shelter for over a month now, and Michael knew it wouldn't be long before they had to move on. Supplies were running low, and although the emergency systems were holding up, it wouldn't last forever. One morning, as Michael finished his early routine of checking the systems, Talia approached him while he was working on the communications panel. "We need to leave," she said, her voice steady but with a hint of urgency. Michael looked up at her, surprised. He had been expecting this conversation soon, but the reality of it hit him hard. "Leave?" he asked, standing up and wiping his hands on his pants. Where would we go? Anywhere but here, Talia replied, her green eyes fixed on the horizon outside. We can't stay in one place forever. If we do, we'll be found. You know that. Michael nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had known this moment would come, but it didn't make it any easier to face. You're right, he said. We need to keep moving. But we can't go without a plan. We'll need more supplies, more shelter. Talia's expression softened, but there was no hesitation in her voice. I'm not asking you to risk your life, Michael, she said, her tone gentle but firm. I'm asking you to trust me. I've seen the world beyond this shelter. I know where we can go. There's a place. A safe place. Michael's mind raced. He had no idea what she was talking about, but there was something in the way she spoke, an assurance, a certainty, that made him believe her. Where is it? He asked. A remote colony, she answered. It's far, and it's dangerous, but it's our best chance. Michael hesitated for a moment, the weight of the decision heavy on him. But then he saw Talia's eyes, filled with determination, and he knew he had no choice but to follow her lead. They had come this far together, and he wasn't about to turn back now. All right, he said, his voice steady. We'll do it. But we'll need to prepare. We'll need to be ready for whatever's out there. Talia nodded, her lips curving into a small smile. We're ready, she said softly. Michael wasn't sure if they truly were, but he couldn't help but feel that, together, they stood a better chance than apart. Over the next few days, they gathered what they could, rationing the remaining supplies, checking the shelter systems one last time, and preparing for the journey ahead. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Each task, though mundane, felt like a small victory, a step toward the unknown. On the morning they were set to leave, Michael stood at the door of the shelter, looking out at the world beyond. The ash fields stretched endlessly, a stark reminder of what they had endured. But beyond the desolation, there was something else. A glimmer of hope. He turned to Talia, who stood beside him, her gaze focused on the horizon. Ready? He asked. She didn't answer right away, but when she looked at him, he saw the same resolve in her eyes that had carried them this far. Ready, she replied. And with that, they stepped out into the unknown, leaving the shelter behind and moving forward, together. The journey was harder than either of them had anticipated. The ash fields were vast, and the constant dust in the air made it difficult to breathe. The sun was a dim blur behind the smoke, casting everything in a sickly orange hue. Michael had grown used to the harsh conditions. But Talia, despite her resilience, seemed to struggle more with each passing day. She was used to harsher climates, no doubt, but the constant grind of the endless terrain was wearing her down. Michael kept an eye on her as they moved, ensuring she didn't fall too far behind. Every now and then, she would glance at him, her bright green eyes filled with a quiet determination that only made him more determined to keep going. They moved steadily, though there were moments when Michael could feel the weight of the silence between them. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with unspoken thoughts, questions neither of them dared to voice. They were both haunted by the past in different ways, but neither of them seemed ready to open up about it. It was easier to keep moving forward, focusing on survival rather than dwelling on the things they couldn't change. One night, as they set up camp in a small hollow beneath a rocky outcrop, the air thick with smoke, Talia spoke again. Do you ever wonder what happens after we get to this place? She asked, her voice quiet, but laced with a subtle edge. Michael looked up from his campfire, surprised by the question. He hadn't expected it, but there was something in her tone that made him think she had been wondering the same thing for some time now. I don't know, he said after a long pause. I guess I just take it one step at a time. I don't know what's waiting for us, but if we don't keep moving, we won't ever find out. Talia nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the flames. I'm not sure I can keep running forever, she said softly. Michael's heart tightened at her words, but he kept his expression neutral. He could tell she was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but he also knew they had no other choice. You don't have to keep running forever, he said, his voice steady. But right now, we don't have a choice. And if we make it through this, we'll find a place where we can finally stop. We'll find a place where we don't have to look over our shoulders anymore. Talia looked at him then, her eyes searching his face for something, perhaps for reassurance, or for something deeper. She didn't speak, but the faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. It was brief, but it was there, and for a moment, Michael felt like maybe, just maybe, there was hope for both of them. The days grew colder, the wind picking up as they moved closer to the mountains. The terrain began to change, the ash fields giving way to rocky outcrops and sparse vegetation. The journey was becoming more dangerous, and the air thinner, but Michael didn't let himself think about the risks. He just focused on getting Talia to safety. They were close now. He could feel it. The colony she had spoken of was within reach. It wasn't much, a small, hidden settlement, but it was better than the endless wasteland they had been surviving in. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the sky grew darker, the storm clouds gathering in the distance. Michael glanced at Talia, noticing the way her eyes scanned the sky. She was tired, but she was also alert, her instincts sharp as ever. Almost there, he said, his voice low. Talia nodded but didn't speak. Her eyes were fixed on the path ahead, and for the first time since they had begun their journey, Michael saw a flicker of something else in her, something he hadn't seen in her before. It was hope, and that hope, however fragile, made everything worth it. The storm had arrived quickly, the winds howling around them as Michael and Talia pushed forward through the craggy mountains. The air was thin, and each breath felt heavier than the last, but they couldn't afford to stop now. The distant lights of the colony were barely visible through the thick clouds, but they were close, closer than ever before. Michael glanced over at Talia, her figure silhouetted against the storm, still moving steadily forward despite the exhaustion that had begun to weigh on both of them. He admired her strength, her determination. She was a warrior, not just by training, but by sheer will. "We're almost there," Michael said, his voice barely audible over the wind. Talia didn't respond right away, but Michael could see her nod. She was focused, her eyes scanning the path ahead, looking for any signs of danger. It had been days since they had last spoken much, too many days of silent trekking through harsh terrain, but there was a quiet understanding between them now. They didn't need to talk. They knew what the other was thinking. "I've never seen anything like this," Talia said suddenly, her voice soft but steady. "The way the world has changed, so much destruction, so many lost." Michael felt a pang in his chest. He knew what she meant. They had both witnessed horrors in their past, but it seemed as if every step forward was a reminder of how much they had both lost. "We're survivors," he replied, his eyes never leaving the path ahead. "We survive for those who didn't." The words felt like a promise, not just to her, but to himself as well. They had lost so much, but they still had each other. They still had the chance to rebuild. Talia's footsteps faltered for a brief moment, and Michael glanced over at her, concerned. But she quickly steadied herself, her expression determined again. "Keep moving," she urged, her voice quiet but insistent. Michael nodded, pushing forward, his heart racing against the storm that now battered against them. The winds were picking up, the snow starting to swirl in dense flurries around them. Visibility was rapidly fading, but Michael could make out the faint outline of a structure in the distance. It was the colony. They had made it. But as they drew closer, Michael's sense of relief was overshadowed by the growing sense of urgency. The storm was closing in on them fast, and there was no time to waste. They reached the outskirts of the colony, the first few buildings barely visible in the dimming light. Michael's muscles were aching, but he pushed through, his mind focused on getting them inside, getting them out of the storm. Talia, still by his side, was slowing down now, but she refused to stop. "Almost there," he said, his voice firm, encouraging. Talia didn't speak, but the look in her eyes was enough. They were in this together. As they finally reached the entrance to the colony, Michael could see the faint glow of lights from within. They were safe, at least for now. But the moment they stepped inside, Michael knew the real battle was just beginning. They had made it, but their future, their survival, depended on what came next. They were survivors, yes, but now they had to figure out how to rebuild, how to find a new life amidst the ruins of everything they had known. As Michael and Talia entered the colony, the first thing that struck them was the warmth. The cold winds of the storm had been relentless, but as they stepped into the shelter, the warmth from the nearby fires and the hum of energy-efficient generators filled the air, offering them a reprieve they hadn't realized they needed. Michael took a deep breath, feeling the exhaustion in his bones, but also a sense of relief. They had made it. The colony wasn't large, but it was a refuge. The buildings were made of durable, weather-resistant materials, designed to withstand harsh conditions like the one they had just endured. People moved about inside, most of them focused on their work, but a few looked up as Michael and Talia entered. There was a brief moment of curiosity, but it quickly faded. To them, these two strangers were just another set of survivors seeking shelter. Michael felt a pang of discomfort. He wasn't sure if it was the weariness of the journey or the reality of what lay ahead, but something about this place felt like a temporary pause rather than a new beginning. The people here were trying to rebuild, just like him and Talia, but there was something resigned about their expressions. They had seen too much, lost too much. This way, Talia said, her voice steady as she led him further into the colony. She moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the area, almost like she was looking for something or someone. Michael followed her, his mind racing. He had to admit that the colony offered a sense of safety, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized it wasn't enough. They had been lucky to make it this far, but luck wouldn't carry them forever. They needed more than just shelter. They needed a plan. They reached a building at the far end of the settlement. It looked more like a meeting hall or communal space than anything else. Talia pushed open the door, revealing a small group of people gathered inside, speaking in hushed tones. As soon as they entered, the conversation stopped. Michael noticed the room go still, the eyes of the group turning toward him and Talia. The tension in the air was palpable, and for a moment, Michael felt like an intruder. Talia stepped forward, her posture straight and confident. "We're here for the next step," she said, her voice firm, making it clear she was not asking for permission. One of the people, a man with graying hair and a weathered face, stood up and nodded. "I thought you'd come eventually," he said. "We've been waiting for the right moment." "The right moment for what?" Michael asked, his curiosity piqued. "To rebuild," the man replied. "We've been rebuilding for years now, trying to create a place where survivors can find safety. But we need more. We need skilled people. We need a plan." Michael exchanged a glance with Talia. He hadn't expected this, but something in the man's tone told him that this was more than just about survival. It was about purpose. "What's your plan?" Talia asked, her voice calm but inquisitive. The man paused before answering, his eyes studying both of them. "We need to start over," he said, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "The old systems are gone. The governments, the corporations, they're all in ruins. If we want to rebuild, we need to do it ourselves. And that means trusting people like you." Michael felt a chill run down his spine, not from fear, but from the realization that this was no ordinary settlement. They weren't just looking for shelter. They were looking to start something new, something bigger. "And what do you need from us?" Michael asked, his voice steady. The man looked at him, his expression serious. "Everything. We need skilled hands, strong hearts, and a plan to make it happen. We can't do it alone." Talia nodded slowly. "We've been surviving," she said. "But I think it's time to start building." Michael couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. For the first time since they had arrived, it felt like there was something more ahead of them than just survival. It felt like the beginning of something real. "Then we'll help," Michael said, his voice firm. "We'll build." And in that moment, he knew they had found their purpose. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were starting something new. A future. Together. In the following days, Michael and Talia found themselves fully immersed in the life of the colony. The small group that had gathered here were more than just survivors. They were dreamers, eager to rebuild from the ashes of their former world. The man who had spoken to them, whose name was Elias, quickly became a key figure in their new community. He wasn't just a leader. He was a mentor, guiding Michael and Talia through the intricacies of this new life. Elias had a vision, one that went beyond simply surviving. He wanted to create a place where people could thrive, where they could start again, without the corruption and destruction that had marred their previous worlds. Michael and Talia quickly became integral parts of this vision. Michael, with his experience in survival and resourcefulness, was put to work helping to secure the colony's boundaries, fortifying what they had and planning for the future. Talia, with her knowledge of alien cultures and her strategic mind, worked closely with Elias, helping to organize and lead efforts to expand the settlement. There were days when it felt like they were still walking in the shadow of the destruction they had left behind, but more and more, the colony began to feel like home. The people here were hardworking and kind. each of them carrying their own stories of loss, but also a shared hope for something better. They had all lost so much, but in this place, they found a reason to keep going. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, Michael stood on the edge of the colony, looking out at the vast, open space. It was strange to think about how much had changed. Just a few months ago, he had been fighting for his life in a desolate wasteland. Now he was part of something bigger. He felt a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging that he hadn't realized he had been missing. As he stood there, Talia approached, her silhouette outlined by the fading light. She stood beside him, not speaking at first, but simply looking out over the colony. "We've come a long way," she said finally, her voice soft, but filled with a quiet strength. Michael nodded, glancing at her. "We have. I never thought it would be possible. Not after everything." Talia smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up her face. "I didn't either," she said. "But here we are, and we're going to keep going. We're building something real." Michael felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He had come to rely on Talia more than he ever expected. She had been his anchor, the one person who understood him in a way that no one else could. And now, they were building this new life together, side by side. The wind picked up slightly, the cool breeze brushing against their skin. Michael turned to face her fully. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "We've made it this far, and we'll keep making it. Together." Talia nodded, her eyes reflecting the last of the dying light. Together. And in that moment, standing on the edge of the new world they had created, Michael knew that whatever came next, they would face it the same way they had faced everything else, together. The journey wasn't over. It had just begun.